They were childhood friends that fell hard for each other.
He just swept her off her feet and she fell in love with him.
A devoted mother and a military man with 3 beautiful children.
They seem to be living a typical American dream lifestyle.
But just when it seemed their happy lives were complete, a brutal murder rips their world apart.
But something had to have gone horribly wrong for this scenario to emerge.
As detectives dig into the investigation, they discover a sinister plot.
The allegations that were being made floored me, that somebody would do something like that.
When we found out who it was just shocking.
The web of lies so tangled, it leaves everyone wondering if they'll ever know the truth.
And there were just all of these layers to this.
Now we're trying to figure out, okay, how does all this come together?
Nothing was adding up.
Everything just kept pulling us in more and more. What's really going on here?
Monday, October 26, 2009. All is quiet in Logan Square, a charming neighborhood on Chicago's North Side. But that evening, 911 receives a call from this peaceful pocket of the Windy City.
This is 911. You need police or fire?
I'm not sure.
The caller identifies himself as Darren Brewer, and he's concerned about his 22-year-old wife, Kenyatte. Darren says she disappeared late Sunday night.
Did you try to contact her by phone?
Yes, me, her mom, dad, and sister been calling her all day and texting, and no response.
Darren hasn't heard from Kenyatte, but he tells the 911 operator that he's found something that could help police track her down.
And as we're driving, we see my car in the alley.
Okay, one that she drives all the time?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What type of vehicle is it?
It's a 2001 Chevy.
Okay, we're going to send the police. Belden and Kildare, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
As police head to Logan Square to check things out, Darren waits for word about his beloved wife. But no one could imagine just how dark and twisted this troubling case was about to get. Kenyatte Collier Brewer was a born and bred Chicago girl. The oldest of 3 siblings, she always stood out in a crowd, even at a young age.
Kenyatte, she just had a great heart. She loved to smile. She just loved to have fun. Kenyatte was a very bright student, inquisitive growing up. She was very outgoing.
But Kenyatte wasn't just smart. She was blessed with brains and beauty.
Oh yeah, all the boys liked her. She was not a big flirt, but everyone told her how pretty she was.
And with every good-looking young man in her neighborhood trying their best to get with her, Kenyatte sometimes found it hard to hold out for Mr. Right. By the time she was 18, she was pregnant with her first child.
I remember when she first had her first son, how happy she was and excited she was. And she just wanted to be a really good mother.
The second she began having children, she became very serious about it. Going back to school, studying nursing, graduating with honors.
After graduating, Kenyatte began working as a nurse's assistant and had high hopes of making a career out of doing something she loved.
She just loved helping people. She loved working with the elderly.
By 2006, everything was coming together for this bright young woman. But she also wanted the right man by her side.
Kenyatte?
Darren, hi.
Hey.
Turns out, he had been hiding in plain sight.
Actually knew Darren Brewer from early in her childhood.
And when their paths crossed again in adulthood, the chemistry was undeniable.
They had known each other for such a long time. There was that belief that they were meant to be together.
I'm definitely gonna call you.
He just swept her off her feet and she fell in love with him.
Like Kenyatte, fellow Chicago native Darren Brewer was smart and ambitious.
He had a pretty big personality. He seemed to be an intelligent person.
He was making a name for himself. He had a nice job at the Illinois National Guard.
It didn't take long for Kenyatte to realize she wanted to spend her life with Darren.
It was kind of a whirlwind romance by all accounts. Some people fall in love, in a few months and they get married and they live happily ever after. And
Her and Darren were very young and they got married. She just wanted to really complete her life.
Before long, that life included 2 more kids of their own. Both at the young age of 22, Kenyatte and Darren seemed to have it all.
She had married the man of her dreams, man in uniform, that was helping her with her first son, and they had 2 other beautiful children. She also had a good job. She was continuing her education, so she felt that she was living out her dreams.
Which makes it all the more surprising when Kenyatte goes missing one Sunday night in October of 2009. Early the next morning, Darren reaches out to friends and family for help.
Hello? Have you heard from Kenyatte?
No, I haven't talked to her today.
When we made contact with Darren, he said that they had a normal evening. Kenyatte came in from work, put the kids down. He was tired, was going to bed.
And she went out with a couple of friends.
He sent her a text message asking her to bring back milk. He got no response. He went to sleep, woke up, and she still wasn't home.
We started to panic, so we felt that it was time for the authorities to get involved.
8 hours into Kenyatte's disappearance, Darren contacts police,
I'd like to report a missing person.
but is told he'd have to wait a few more hours before he can file a missing persons report.
Police often tell people to wait 24 hours to report someone missing to make sure they actually are missing. It could be a false alarm.
Left with few options, Darren holds out hope that his wife would soon turn up. But that evening, after picking up their kids from daycare, Darren spots something chilling along his drive home.
He discovers his wife's vehicle parked unattended in an alley. That's when he makes a 911 call.
With 3 small children in the car, Darren decides it's best not to stop and examine his wife's car. Instead, he drives the short distance home and waits for law enforcement to search the vehicle.
When the police first arrived at the car, there was nothing unusual. There was no damage to the car, and there was no one inside.
Unlocked.
The doors were unlocked. They searched the inside of the vehicle, and they didn't find anything.
But moments later, everything changes.
One of the officers pressed the trunk release button. The other officer at the rear of the vehicle at that time made a gruesome discovery.
There was a woman's body stuffed inside. She was wearing a nurse's uniform. She had blood covering her head. She was clearly deceased.
She still had her name tag on, so they knew it was Darren's wife, Kenyatte Brewer.
So now, at this point, the missing persons case has turned into a homicide.
Why would someone kill this popular, attractive young woman who seemingly had everything going for her? Just didn't make sense.
What investigators don't realize is that Kenyatte's mysterious death is about to open a Pandora's box of deception and greed, the horrific likes of which no one will ever forget.
Everyone has been shocked, hoping that it was still not true.
Devoted couple Darren Brewer and Kenyatte Collier Brewer had promising careers, a loving marriage, and a happy home with 3 adorable children.
They seem to be living the typical American dream lifestyle. He was a nice-looking fellow employed with the Illinois National Guard in service to his country, and she was a nurse's assistant.
But all that changed on October 26, 2009. After having gone missing, Kenyatte is found dead in the trunk of her own car in the northwest side of Chicago.
Kenyatte is church-going, loving mother and wife, not the person that you would expect to end up in this situation.
How does a lady like her end up in the back of a trunk?
At the crime scene, detectives try to find some answers to this mystery.
What we got?
Investigators were called to the scene. They were trying to figure out what happened, what was going on.
They're looking at the body, and it's obvious that Kenyatte has been shot in the head. Her body is then removed to confirm her cause of death and hopefully to find some evidence that can be linked back to the killer.
Unfortunately, the scene provides few clues as to how Kenyatte ended up there.
You're looking for a shell casing from the bullet. You're looking for a gun. You're looking for a shoe, a glove, Anything that would give you an idea of who the suspect was?
Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Nothing seemed out of place. There were no clues as to say what happened, what led up to this.
Without hard evidence, detectives must consider all possibilities.
Was it a robbery gone bad? Was it a simple carjacking? Did the crime happen here? Or was her body dumped here?
Robberies and carjackings are crimes of opportunity, and the people that perpetrate those crimes, generally they select likely victims. She would have probably been an appealing target with a nurse's uniform, small build, 5'2", 130 pounds. That had to be considered.
But as police know, a deadly robbery would be highly unusual in the quiet Logan Square neighborhood.
Carjackings, robberies, things of that nature in that particular area don't happen with any high frequency at all. Crime scene tape in this neighborhood was a big deal. A canvass was conducted. That's standard, you know, did anybody see anything, hear anything?
While CSIs continue to process the scene, detectives are left with the grim task of informing Kenyate's husband, Darren, of his wife's death.
We've identified the body of your deceased wife.
You can't imagine that someone would hurt her. Not his caring wife, not the woman that everyone loved. He just can't imagine that someone would want to hurt her like this.
We are sorry for your loss.
Detectives have no reason to suspect Darren had anything to do with his wife's death, but maybe Darren can help them track down the killer.
Did your wife have any enemies?
Was there previous history of violence? Did she have a criminal background? Did she live a high-risk lifestyle?
Darren is positive Kenyate wasn't involved in any illegal activity, but he then says something startling.
There was this one incident last year.
Approximately a year earlier, Kenyate was exiting the residence along with her husband, Darren. She actually sustained a gunshot while she was 6 months pregnant. And in fact, her husband had also sustained a less serious injury as well.
Anything ever developed from that?
No, sir.
Was there anything else that's ever happened?
A few weeks before her murder, she was cut in the face with a bottle. Someone threw a bottle at her while she was in the car.
They were sitting at a stoplight, and all of a sudden, here comes this bottle flying through the window and cut her face.
Initially, it seemed the attacks on Kenyate were random and unrelated. But now, detectives wonder if they are somehow connected to our murder.
Give us a call if there's anything else you can think of.
Detectives obviously had to take them into consideration if there was some type of a ongoing threat to her person.
If someone has been attacked and then turns up dead, it seems as though this may not be a random act of violence. Detectives have to ask themselves then if someone is out to get her.
It seems impossible that this devoted mother and nurse's assistant could have any enemies whatsoever. But detectives are about to learn that a shocking secret may have sparked a vicious act of retribution.
The lies and jealousy and the betrayal is unreal.
"22-year-olds Darren Brewer and Kenyate Collier Brewer and their 3 kids had a picture-perfect life together. But that fairy tale was shattered when Kenyate was found shot dead in the trunk of her own car.
This young woman who was bursting with energy was gone, and now there's this void. In one fell swoop, the mother's gone, and now these children are motherless.
The family was grieving, but then also there's her husband, Darren. He's grieving. He's lost his wife, the mother of his kids.
They were reeling, just totally reeling, trying to make sense of all of it.
Meanwhile, detectives are trying to figure out if Kenyate had been specifically targeted. Darren tells them she had been the victim of 2 violent crimes over the past year.
It starts to look like someone is actually out to hurt her, that she's not just a random victim.
The second attack on Kenyate left severe cuts to her face. The detectives have to ask then, could this be more personal?
Investigators need to learn more about their victim, so they go to her family. Like husband Darren, they're still overwhelmed by Kenyate's death.
Our worst nightmare had come true.
She worked hard. She didn't do any drugs. She took care of her family. She did a lot of family-oriented activities.
When she left work, did someone follow her? Did the car break down? Our minds was just racing and just really could not come to grips with still who could have done this to her.
With the family at a loss for an explanation, and with police finding no suspects in the first two attacks, the investigation seems to have hit a dead end. That is, until police ask about Kenyete and Darren's relationship.
They had a good relationship. Darren was very good with the kids.
Darren Brewer looked like a family man. He was in the military. He expected to be deployed out to Afghanistan.
But all was not well in paradise.
When you say appeared to be the perfect couple, could you elaborate?
The family has learned that Darren has been keeping a deep, dark secret.
He was having an affair.
He's got another lover.
With whom?
It was a man.
Darren had been in the closet and in denial about his sexual orientation, but it got to the point where he just couldn't deny it anymore. Darren was gay and was having an affair.
It was still somewhat shocking to some of the family members and maybe to Kenyete as well that the affair he was having was in fact with a man.
But apparently, Darren had no intention of leaving his wife.
He has this polished image. I have a wife, I have kids that I love. So no one can find out about this. No one can find out how he's been living a double life.
He had a military career at risk. He had this, at least on paper, little family unit that he was trying to maintain for appearances.
According to Kenyate's family, even after she discovered Darren's secret life, the couple continued to live together. But Kenyete became increasingly unhappy while Darren sought comfort in the arms of his male lover.
Once you start hearing those details, all it just leaves you with more and more questions. And everything just kept pulling us in more and more. Like, what's really going on here?
The family is now wondering if this has something to do with Kenyate's death.
In speaking to Kenyate's family, detectives learned the man Darren has been seeing is named Joseph Matthews.
When detectives determine that someone is having an affair, it raises all sorts of questions.
That's a pretty big moment, because now you've got what you think is some sort of motive.
If Darren doesn't want to get a divorce because he doesn't want to put his career at risk, that could have caused problems for Darren's boyfriend. Detectives have to consider whether Darren's boyfriend wanted to end the marriage at any cost.
There's only one way to find out. Detectives must find Darren's boyfriend.
He's become involved in this now, whether he wants to be or not.
On the evening of October 26, 2009, police track down Joseph Matthews and bring him in for questioning.
Have a seat here.
Detectives immediately confront him about his relationship with Darren.
How long have you known each other?
I've known him since May.
Were you intimate?
Yes, we were.
Joseph is forthcoming about his relationship with Darren, and when the conversation turns to Kenyete, Joseph makes a startling admission.
I knew they had kids, but Darren never told me he was married.
Not only does Joseph deny harboring any ill will towards Kenyete, he seems genuinely upset about her death. Still, detectives are curious about his whereabouts on the night of October 25th. According to Joseph, while he admits that he saw Darren earlier that evening, he was at home, in bed, at the time of the crime.
Anyone see you?
Yeah, my roommates.
You have a number we can call?
Yeah.
Detectives speak to Joseph's roommates and ultimately verify his alibi. At that point, they have no choice but to cut him loose. With their primary suspect all but eliminated, police can't help but wonder, if Joseph didn't kill Kenyete, then who did? Before detectives can consider their next move, they get a surprising new lead.
Darren comes to the police with a bombshell.
What can you tell us, Darren?
I know who killed my wife.
Who?
It was my brother.
He named his brother Dewan as being the gunman who actually shot and killed Kenyete.
Police are stunned. Darren has just identified his wife's killer. But why would Darren's brother Dewan want to kill Kenyete? According to Darren, Kenyate came to him a few weeks earlier with a disturbing allegation.
Kenyate tells her husband that in fact his brother came over and forcibly raped her.
Darren confronted his brother, but his brother said that it was not a rape.
He said it was consensual.
She was not that type of a person. She loved her husband, she loved her kids. So I find it very hard to believe that she consented to have sex with him, period.
According to Darren, if the sex wasn't consensual, then Dewan had ample motive to murder Kenyate.
Darren thinks that he may have killed Kenyate to keep her quiet.
It's a stunning accusation, but police are curious why Darren waited so long to tell them.
He's my brother.
He says he didn't say anything at first because it was his brother, but now he's afraid for his and his children's safety.
This, of course, is a huge development in the case.
Do you know where your brother is?
He's at his girlfriend's house.
We're gonna need an address.
Darren tells police that Dewan has been staying with his girlfriend and gives them the address. They go to the house. Police think they're about to get their suspect.
Is Mr. Poe on the premises right now?
He's nowhere to be found.
They make contact with the girlfriend at location, and in short order, she gives them a consent to search.
Go ahead, guys.
They scour the apartment, and between two mattresses, they find a .380 semi-automatic pistol.
Detective.
The gun is the same caliber as the bullet recovered from Kenyate's body.
I have a gun.
Police are hot on his trail, and he's nice enough to leave a murder weapon right there, you know, where he laid his head.
At this point in the investigations, the detectives have a motive. They have the weapon. They just need to find the suspect.
But just when it appears they are on the verge of solving the case, detectives get a tip that changes everything.
It's definitely an onion where layers are being peeled back. What are we going to find out now about this case?
Kenyate Collier Brewer, a beautiful mother of 3, was discovered dead, stuffed in the trunk of her car. The crime itself was shocking enough. But investigators were even more surprised to learn that Kenyate's husband, Darren, was having an affair with another man. But during his interrogation, Darren named his own brother, Dewan Poe, as the killer.
When Darren comes forward and points the finger at his brother, this is a huge development in the case. The murder suspect has landed in their laps, and it changes the whole course of the investigation.
Darren says he thinks Dewan killed her to keep her quiet about an alleged rape Dewan committed against Kenyate.
The motivation came along with the fear that Kenyate might accuse him of rape.
A search of Dewan's girlfriend's apartment turns up the murder weapon. All detectives need to do now is find Dewan Poe. Police fan out in search of Dewan and soon hit pay dirt. A local gas station attendant claims he may know something about the case.
In police work, there is no bad lead. Some may be a dead end, some may turn out to be actually good.
Police drive to the south side of Chicago, more than 15 miles away from where Kenyate was discovered. At the gas station, an employee describes an incident that took place the night Kenyate disappeared.
The other night, I'm working the register.
The gas station attendant tells detectives that when he was working Sunday night, he heard a woman scream.
So I look outside and I see a couple standing there.
And there was another man wearing a mask that looked like he had a gun.
So he puts the man in the driver's seat and the woman in the passenger seat.
Get in the car and drive!
And then he himself gets in the vehicle and they speed away.
The attendant tells police he reported the incident, but detectives will need more information in order to determine if it was connected to Kenyate's murder.
Did you see what color the car was?
It was blue.
Kenyate's car was indeed blue, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was the one used in the carjacking witnessed by the attendant.
You have camera surveillance here too, right?
Yeah, I've got them everywhere.
If you don't care, could we have a look at that?
Hey, sure, come on back.
It was private surveillance video that really showed everything.
Specifically, the video shows Darren and Kenyate at the gas station together.
Detectives watch the video and see Darren and Kenya Tay pull into the gas station.
That shows the vehicle that Kenya Tay was later discovered murdered in.
The video also shows Darren and Kenya Tay's children sitting in the back seat of the car.
Then a masked gunman appears in the footage.
Is it possible Darren and Kenya Tay were carjacked, and that's how Kenya Tay ended up dead? Detectives mull this over as they watch the surveillance video. That's when they notice something very peculiar.
What's he doing in the trunk?
Before Darren gets back into the car, he goes to the trunk and rearranges some things around.
Yeah, that's odd.
Can you pause that right there?
Yes, sir. This is the same trunk where Kenya Tay's body was found less than 24 hours later. That's suspicious.
The surveillance footage raises a bunch of questions. Why didn't Darren mention the carjacking when he reported Kenya Tay missing to the police? Why was he rearranging things in the trunk?
To answer those questions, detectives haul Darren back down to the station and confront him about the surveillance footage.
Darren, you know why you're here.
We saw all the surveillance at the gas station.
He basically, at that point, identifies his brother, Dewan Poe, as in fact the person that carjacked him.
What happened next?
He left for Kenya Tay. I didn't know he was gonna do anything like this.
Why didn't you tell us this before?
I didn't want my brother to go to prison.
Darren says that he didn't mention the carjacking initially because he was trying to protect his brother.
To detectives, Darren's news story doesn't ring entirely true.
Darren's claim that he kept the carjacking from the police to protect his brother just doesn't add up. Because again, why is he moving stuff around in the trunk?
Why he would let this happen, just get out of the car and let Dewan go off without calling anybody. It just didn't seem to make any sense.
I'm not buying it. Stand up.
Convinced that he and brother Dewan conspired to murder Kenya Tay, detectives placed Darren under arrest. Shortly after that, Dewan gets wind of his brother's arrest and turns himself in.
He knew they were coming for him.
Darren and Dewan are charged with first-degree murder. Kenya Tay's family is stunned. They can't believe Darren was involved.
Darren was pretending to be such a wonderful husband, but it was just all fake. It was fake, it was phony, it was staged.
But what exactly was Darren's motive for murdering Kenya Tay? Protecting his brother? Keeping his homosexual affair under wraps? Or something else? As Darren and Dewan's trial plays out, it becomes evident that the motive in this case was even more heinous than anyone ever imagined.
It could have been a film. It could have been either a B movie or it could have been an Oscar award-winning film. The details were just so ridiculous.
In June 2013, almost 4 years after Kenya Tay Collier Brewer was brutally murdered, the trial begins for her accused killers, her husband, Darren Brewer, and his brother, Dewan Poe.
We were really anticipating the trial, wanting to just get through it, get it over with, so that they can pay for what they've done.
In an unusual move, the state decides the two brothers will be tried together, though they will be represented counsel. And when their respective attorneys deliver their opening statements, it becomes clear the brothers are willing to throw each other under the bus in order to save their own skin.
It kind of became a brother against brother situation. The defense attorneys each kind of blamed the other's client. Dewan Poe's attorney said he had nothing to do with it. It was all Darren Brewer's plan. Darren Brewer's attorney said he was in denial. He didn't know what was going to happen when Dewan and Kenya Tay drove away in that car.
But there's one thing Dewan and Darren's attorneys can agree on. The dueling versions of the crime indicate there's enough reasonable doubt to acquit both men on all charges.
The defense attorneys for Darren Brewer and Dewan Poe said the evidence was lacking.
Prosecutors countered that the brothers conspired to murder Kenya Tay and concocted the fake carjacking as a ruse to mask their involvement in the crime. Only after the surveillance video implicated both of them in the crime did the brothers turn on each other.
There seemed to be this faithfulness where Dewan would try and go do this for his brother. Then once they're in the courtroom, they're turning on each other.
As for motive, prosecutors claim Darren would go to any length, including murder, to keep his superiors at the National Guard from learning about his secret gay life.
Darren had an image to maintain, especially with the military. If they would have learned that he was gay, it may have jeopardized his career.
But prosecutors argue Darren's motive had a financial angle as well.
Apparently there was an insurance policy. It was initially $50,000 that had recently been increased.
At the time of the murder, Darren had life insurance policies on Kenyete totaling more than $150,000. Policies, prosecutors say, would be worthless in the event of a divorce.
If the marriage ended, the life insurance policies could go away.
Darren has reached a point of no return. He's maybe feeling some sense of desperation. I've got this relationship with this fellow that I want to continue. It probably had him at a point where he's like, my wife, Kenyete, has got to die.
So now he needs to move quickly. So Darren and his brother plotted together to kill her and that they would split this money.
There's an additional reason.
According to prosecutors, in Dewan's case, the insurance money is only half the motive.
To prevent her from making a rape allegation against one of these defendants.
Not only do we have Darren trying to cash in on a life insurance policy, we also have the two brothers trying to silence Kenyete about the rape. There aren't very many cases where you have two motives.
Ladies and gentlemen, allegations and suppositions do not a case make.
Darren's defense attorney calls the state's theory preposterous and argues that brother Dewan acted alone when he murdered Kenyete.
Dewan cold-bloodedly and with malice took the life of Kenyete.
They said that it was Dewan Poe who was the actual trigger man. He's the one who stood over Kenyete and fired 2 messengers of death into her head.
It's an allegation Dewan's defense attorney has difficulty refuting, given police had recovered the murder weapon from underneath his bed. But if that was the case, why hadn't Darren tried to stop his brother from murdering Kenyete? Darren's defense attorney argues it's because Darren thought Dewan was just going to scare Kenyete into keeping quiet about the rape allegations, and had no idea his brother intended to kill her.
That night when Dewan carjacked Darren and Kenyete and the kids, Darren's attorney said that he believed that they were just going to have a conversation, that Dewan and Kenyete were going to sit in the car and talk and figure out how to handle what had happened between them.
But prosecutors assert Darren knew exactly what was about to transpire that evening. And to back up their assertion, they call the defendant's cousin, Taryn Webb, to the stand to testify.
Taryn, do I understand you overheard a conversation between these two brothers?
Yes, sir. Well, there was a first attempt. They wanted to go over to her house and strangle her and make it look like a robbery gone bad.
The initial plan is that Dewan Poe is going to kill the wife and make it look like maybe an apparent robbery gone bad.
And what happened after that?
I guess he went and got sidetracked, and he didn't end up killing her. He ended up having sex with her.
When he went to do it, he saw her coming out of the bathroom and became aroused, and they had sex.
It's very striking to me that he went to the home to supposedly to strangle her, but had sex with her. There's something very twisted and psychotic about that.
Taryn says this was the alleged rape Kenyete told Darren about.
So now Dewan and Darren come up with a plan that they definitely have to get rid of her. They need the life insurance money. They can't have this rape allegation out there. Darren has another lover. They must do something. They then devise a plan to do a carjacking.
Following Taryn's chilling testimony, prosecutors paint a picture of what happened next. After Kenyete finished work on the evening of October 25th, she picked up Darren and the kids and asked him to drive home because she was tired after her long shift.
He He got off of the Dan Ryan Expressway on the south side of the city. And he didn't go to just the first gas station off the expressway. He went several blocks west, and that's where it all seemed to begin.
Hey, get in the car! Get in the driver's seat now! Get in the front seat!
With Darren and Kenyate's children looking on, a masked Dewan played out the fake carjacking to an unwitting Kenyate. After leaving the gas station, Darren pulled into a dimly lit alley not far from their home in Logan Square.
Shut the hell up and get in the trunk.
Whatever you do not hurt me.
Dewan orders her into the trunk.
Shut up before I kill you.
Darren ends up being dropped off with the kids, and then Dewan drives off with her in the trunk. He doesn't go very far before the car is discovered in very close proximity to their residence up on the north side.
According to prosecutors, unaware that she knew her abductor, a frightened Kenyate begged for mercy.
No, please don't.
But Dewan showed none.
He ends up cold-bloodedly killing her.
It's a gruesome account, but it's also complicated and could make the jury's job difficult. Dewan pulled the trigger, but was Darren the crime's real mastermind?
I feel that Darren lured his brother in with the money. And to me, it's like this is something that he had premeditated.
And of course, in Dewan Poe's instance, obviously he was looking to have a financial gain, and now he's secondarily motivated by the fact that there's a possibility that he's going to be arrested with her outcry of this rape that he's saying was consensual.
Between the multiple motives and conflicting accounts, it seems like the road to a guilty verdict is a bumpy one. But prosecutors still have one card left to play. And for these two alleged murderers, it will mean the difference between a life of freedom or one behind bars.
There was a good sense that the other shoe was going to drop at some point.
The trial of brothers Darren Brewer and Dewan Poe has revealed a bizarre plot that prosecutors claim culminated with the murder of Darren's wife, Kenyate Collier Brewer.
You got this guy that's known his wife his whole life, but all along he's got this secret life that he's trying to hide from her.
The news that Darren was gay and had relationships, and the fact that the brother was supposed to have strangled his sister-in-law and then wound up having sex with her.
There were just all of these layers to this. The failed attempt to kill her the first time in the carjacking. How cold it seemed to be driving the car with your wife in the trunk and your kids right there, and then just to walk away.
But with each brother pointing the finger at the other, is it possible they both could walk?
Despite all of the loyalty that had allegedly been shown between the two brothers, the one carrying out this plan for the other, the one trying to protect the other against the rape allegation, that all ended in the courtroom.
Despite all of the back and forth, prosecutors have an ace up their sleeve, one they've been holding since the day the two brothers were arrested.
Darren confessed on videotape.
It's damning evidence. There's nothing more powerful than a confession.
Prosecutors contend Darren's confession is proof their theory about the crime is legit. And after closing arguments, the jury begins to deliberate. Kenyate's family hopes they'll deliver some measure of justice.
When someone does something like this, you want them to be punished. And that's what we wanted. We wanted them to be punished.
After several hours of deliberation, the jury announces it's reached verdicts for both Darren and Dewan.
The verdict on both of the brothers was guilty. Darren was sentenced to 99 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections, and his brother, Dewan, received life sentence plus 21 years.
It was a relief. They got what they deserved. You act like an animal, then you need to be treated like one.
Although Kenyate's family feels vindicated, the verdicts can't fill the void created by her death or the pain wrought by Darren and Dewan's cold-blooded actions motivated by secrets, greed, and double lives.
It's like somebody has like really ripped your heart right out of your chest. You know, no anesthesia, just in and out. Just clawed your heart out of your chest.
We're looking at two young men who clearly have some severe sociopathy within them. At best, she ran into some bad characters. At worst, she walked into a setup.
What should have been a promising future for a young soldier in the Illinois National Guard and his nurse wife and their three lovely children, and now these kids are gonna have a life without a father and without a mother.
You know, we have to tell them about her smile. We have to tell them how bright she was, that she loved you guys. And that it wasn't her choice to not be your mom anymore. He took that, just snatched away.
Never heard the full strength of the case. That key testimonies were never presented. Chad Carr walked out of that jail a free man. But this is not over. Double jeopardy does not apply to a grand jury's decision. Investigators are still working. They have DNA from that shower drain that does not belong to anyone who lived in that house. They are holding it close to their chests, waiting for the technology, or the one missing piece of evidence, to lock the door on Chad Carr for good. When asked if he killed Brittany, Chad has never explicitly denied it. He has only said, "You won't find my DNA." That is not the response of an innocent man. That is a response of a predator who thinks he washed his tracks clean enough. Brittany McGlone was a 19-year-old girl who wanted to be a nurse. She wanted to spend her life healing people. Instead, her life was cut short in a quiet bedroom by a coward who could not control his own dark impulses. Her family is still waiting on the outside of that small circle, waiting for the truth to finally break through. I tell you, the truth is a patient thing. It doesn't wash away in a shower, and it doesn't disappear in a grand jury room. It just waits. And sooner or later, the light always finds a shadow. Human beings are strange creatures. They commit the most unthinkable acts for a reason so absurd, so trivial, that they would defy the logic of any sane mind. You find yourself standing in the dark, looking at a life extinguished, and you realize that the world does not care about the truth unless you force it to. My. The case of Spencer Irwin is a testament to the sheer, blistering incompetence that can fester within a badge. A story of a young man discarded by the very system designed to protect him. I tell you, it makes my blood run cold to see how easily they write off a human life as just another statistic. Another body in a loading dock, another drug casualty. They assumed he was just another transient who took too much, stripped down in a fever dream of narcotics, and died in the dirt. You have to be kidding me. A 30-year-old man found naked, and they did not even bother to conduct an autopsy. They took his blood for a screen to confirm the fantasy they had already constructed in their minds. Ignoring the reality staring them in the face, they did not collect his clothes. They did not secure the scene. They did not look for the truth because the truth was inconvenient. Spencer Irwin was not a stereotype. He was a son, a man who struggled with his own demons, yet reached out to others lost in shadows, offering them the very hope he fought to maintain for himself. He was a man with a mother, Kelly, who possessed more investigative grit than a room full of complacent detectives. When the authorities told her the case was closed, that it was natural causes, she did not retreat. She stood her ground while the system tried to gaslight her, tried to tell her that her son had simply ceased to be. They spoke of cardiac events and the habits of a man in recovery, yet they could not explain why he was found in a place he had no reason to be, or why he was undressed in the California heat. It was not natural, and it was not a simple overdose. It was a failure of duty. The investigation, if you can call it that, was a tragedy of errors. When a mother has to piece together her own son's final movements, When she has to identify suspects like the individual named Angel who occupied her son's apartment after he was gone, you know the foundation of justice has crumbled. There was a car, a white vehicle captured on grainy footage, moving in the dark, and yet the initial response was silence. They wanted her to stop looking, to stay safe, to just accept the narrative of a man who died from his own lifestyle. That is not police work. That is an insult to every person who has ever sworn an oath. When you look at the crime scene photos, those symmetrical marks in the dirt, the line across his neck that screams of something other than a fall, you realize that the lack of an autopsy was the ultimate sin. They destroyed the evidence of his death, and in doing so, they left a mother in a state of eternal questioning. Spencer was a man of value. A witness saw him that morning and knew immediately that something was wrong, that he did not belong to the streets, that he was a victim of something foul. But the officers on the scene were already looking for an exit, already preparing to return to the comfort of their apathy. It is a haunting thing to know that his last act was to try to improve his life, to prepare for rehab, to fix his connection to the world, only to be cut down by forces that remain shrouded in shadow. The laptop, the missing phone, the strange messages, the connections to those he tried to help, these are not the threads of a natural death. They are the frayed edges of a story that someone is trying to keep quiet. I look at Kelly Irwin, and I see a force of nature. She fought, she reached out, and she refused to let her son be defined by the lazy conclusions of men who did not care enough to check the facts. She found a witness who cared. She consulted a forensic pathologist who confirmed the red flags that the coroner chose to ignore. She kept his memory alive, even when the ones in charge tried to bury it along with his body. It is a dark, cold realization that in this life, you might have to fight for your own dignity, even after you are gone. We owe it to the victims, we owe it to the truth, and we owe it to the mothers who will never stop asking why. I have seen many things in my years behind a desk and out in the field, but the sheer, reckless dismissal of a life is something that never ceases to turn my stomach. Justice is not a gift. It is a battle, and in the case of Spencer Irwin, the battle is far from over. My, people are strange creatures. They walk through this world believing they can bury their secrets as easily as they bury their trash. But they forget one thing. The truth has a funny way of crawling back to surface. It is a persistent thing. It does not sleep, and it certainly does not stay quiet forever. I have seen it 1,000 times in my career. You have individuals who think they are clever, concocting elaborate fairy tales to mask their cowardice, while a family is left in the freezing dark, waiting for a son who is never coming home. You have to be kidding me. You think you can just vanish into thin air, leaving your life behind, and no one will notice? Someone always notices. The silence of the missing is deafening. This is the story of Christopher Cole Thomas, a young man who had the world at his feet. A bright, driven kid. He was a salutatorian of his high school, a kid who wanted to get into medicine because he understood what it meant to care for someone else. But at 22, he was trying to find his way, feeling the weight of the world, just looking for a bit of experience. He trusted the wrong people. He jumped into a vehicle with two men, Julian Vias Jr. and Jeremy Carpenter, thinking he was just tagging along for a bit of work and a road trip. But the road they were on did not lead to Minnesota. It led to a place where morality goes to die. They claimed they were traveling, but that is a bold-faced lie. They were chasing a fix. They drove all the way to North Carolina to buy methamphetamine. And when you dance with the devil, do not be surprised when he tries to lead. Something went wrong that night in November of 2016. The stories they told the police in the small town of Benson were shifting, contradictory, and frankly, insulting to anyone with a badge and a brain. They said Cole panicked, grabbed the keys, and ran off into the night. They said he was having mental health issues. I have heard it all. When a story changes every time you turn around, it is not a lapse in memory. It is a lie. I tell you, The cowardice on display here is staggering. These men, Julian and Jeremy, they reported him missing, yet they did not have the common decency to call his parents. They just went back to their lives, leaving a young man to face whatever nightmare they had triggered. Cole's father, Chris, had to do the detective work himself, finding connections on social media, pulling the strings that the so-called authorities had missed in those early, crucial hours. And what he found was enough to turn your blood to ice. He found out his son was not just running away. He was running for his life. The police work here, spearheaded by Captain Greg Percy, was meticulous. It took weeks of poring over surveillance footage until he found those 30 seconds at 1:10 in. The morning, a grainy image of Cole walking down the street, and right behind him, Jeremy. No panique, no running, just a slow, calculated walk. The mask was slipping. Every time they were confronted with the cold, hard data, the cell phone pings, the location logs, their stories evolved like a shapeshifter. First, they were alone. Then they were at a church. Then they heard gunshots. It is pathetic. They had Cole's phone the entire time, carrying it with them like a guilty souvenir. Likely try to crack it, trying to erase the trail of their own incompetence and malice. The theory that emerges from this mess is as dark as it gets. You have people like Rudolfo De Leon Jr. and Anthony James Jr., players in a drug world where human life is worth less than a bag of crystals. Maybe it was a double cross. Maybe the drugs were tossed, or maybe they were stolen. Whatever the spark, the fire consumed a young man who was simply in over his head. You can see the desperation in the way the suspects move, the way they try to control the narrative. But the digital trail does not lie. It places them all in a web of movement that defies their innocent explanations. I look at the parents, Chris and Kathy, and my heart breaks. They spent months in a trailer, searching fields and ditches, turning over every stone. They even went so far as to bond one of the suspects, Anthony James Jr., out of jail just to get him away from the others, hoping he would tell the truth. They played a game of psychological chess with a man who had already shown he was willing to let a boy vanish. They got fragments. They got hints. They got the cold, hard realization that the people who knew what happened were terrified of their own shadows. In the end, the charges were dropped, not because they were innocent, but because the machinery of justice sometimes needs a better foundation than just suspicion. Jeremy Carpenter is gone now, taking his answers to the grave, but the others remain. They're walking around, breathing air, living lives, while a family is left with an empty chair and a lifetime of questions. It is a tragedy of the highest order. A young man with a future was extinguished because he got caught in the crossfire of people who viewed him as a pawn. It is not just a disappearance. It is a stain on humanity. I have spent my life looking at the worst of us, and I can tell you, the truth is always there. It is waiting in the data, in the silences, in the gaps between the lies. Someone knows where Cole is, and as long as they keep that secret, they are carrying a weight that will eventually pull them under. My, you can run, you can hide, you can lie until you are blue in the face, but the truth, it always catches up. My. You see, the thing about human beings is that they're fragile creatures, and sometimes they break in the most spectacular and terrifying ways. You sit there, you look at the evidence, and you try to piece together a puzzle where half the pieces are missing, and the other half seem to belong to a completely different box. I have spent a lifetime looking into the eyes of people who thought they could hide the truth. But this case, the Jameson family, it has a cold, biting reality to it that stays with you long after the lights go out. You want to talk about monsters? Well, you have to look past the shadows, past the talk of demons and witchcraft, because those are just stories we tell ourselves to avoid looking at the jagged reality of what one person can do to another. Let us look at the facts. You have Bobby and Sherilyn Jameson, a couple trying to escape their own demons, searching for a fresh start on a rugged stretch of land in Latimer County, Oklahoma. They had their plans, they had their dreams, and they had a significant amount of cash, roughly $32,000, tucked away under the seat of their truck. Does that sound like a family intending to commit suicide? I tell you, it does not. A person who plans to leave this world does not usually worry about property taxes or the logistics of homeschooling their 6-year-old daughter. Madison, they were planning for a future. Yet they drove into those mountains on that 8th day of October in 2009, and they simply vanished. When the truck was discovered, it was locked with the keys still in the ignition, and that poor little dog trapped inside, starving and on the verge of death. You have to be kidding me. If someone is planning to take their own life, why leave a child and a dog behind to suffer such a cruel fate? No, that does not hold water. The 7-page letter Sherilyn wrote to Bobby, filled with accusations and talk of toxic spirits, is often painted as a suicide note, but I see it differently. It is a cry of a woman who is unraveling, someone trapped in a cycle of pain, addiction, and mental illness, living in a house she felt was haunted by a suffocating, dark presence. The neighbors saw it, her friends saw it, and the tragedy is that they were all spiraling downward together. People want to talk about the surveillance footage, that grainy video of the family walking back and forth to their truck as if they were in a trance. Was it drugs? Was it a psychological break? Or was it just a family trying to load a vehicle while overwhelmed by the weight of their own lives? The truth is, that video has been dissected, sensationalized, and turned into a piece of folklore, but it tells us very little about what actually happened on that mountain. What it does tell us is that they were there, and shortly after, they were gone. When their remains were finally found years later, in 2013, just 2.6 miles from that abandoned truck, it settled a debate about whether they had just walked away to start a new life. They did not. They were in the wilderness, and they were dead. The fact that their skulls were found in such a remote area, in a place that would be an arduous, punishing hike even for a person in perfect health, completely destroys the idea of a simple murder-suicide or a tragic accident. You do not just stumble into that terrain, and you certainly do not end up there by happenstance. This was foul play. Someone, or perhaps a group of someone's, made sure they did not come back down that mountain. I look at the individuals involved, and my mind keeps drifting back to the people who knew they were coming, the people who knew about the money. Sheriff Beacham always said follow the money, and that is exactly where the trail goes cold. You have the property owners, you have the locals living off the grid, and you have a web of stories that shift every time you try to pin them down. Dan Clemens, a man with a history of violence under a different name, claimed to have spoken with them, gave them directions, and then just happened to be the one who didn't call the police immediately when the truck was finally spotted. It is suspicious, it is messy, and it is the kind of thing that makes my blood boil. The system failed them. Because the cause of death could not be determined, the investigation stalled, and the case was relegated to a missing persons file that no one is actively working. That is a failure of justice. A family is dead, a little girl is dead, and the people responsible are likely still walking free, perhaps even living on that same mountain. It is a haunting thought, is it not? That in this world you can be erased, and the people who swore to find the truth just move on to the next desk, the next call, the next tragedy. I have seen enough death to know that evil does not always wear a mask. Sometimes it just wears the face of a neighbor who knows more than they are willing to say. The Jameson family was looking for a sanctuary, a place to be free from the noise of the world. And instead, they found a grave. My heart aches for that little girl, Madison, who had no choice in the darkness her parents brought her into, and no chance to escape the fate that met them on that mountain. Justice is not just a word. It is a promise we make to the victims. And right now, that promise is broken. If you know something, if you have a shred of evidence, you have an obligation to bring it forward, because silence is just another way of letting the wrong people win. Human beings are strange creatures. They commit atrocities for the most trivial reasons imaginable. driven by impulses that would make a sane person shudder. I tell you, you have to be kidding me if you think there is any logic in the darkness of a man like David Meyerhofer. My, looking at this case is like staring into a bottomless pit of cold. Calculated malice disguised as the life of a local carpenter. You have a quiet, serene Montana landscape in the summer of 1973. And then you have a monster slicing through the nylon fabric of a 12-year-old girl's tent, snatching a child from the very sanctuary of her family. Marietta Yeager, a mother forced into a nightmare that no parent should ever endure, becomes the tip of the spear in this investigation. She is not a professional, but she possesses an unrelenting determination, a fire that burns brighter than the pathetic lies of a coward. She is the hero here, not the man with the badge, and certainly not the predator playing games with her grief. When I analyze the psychology of a man like Meyerhofer, I see a classic, pathetic narcissist. He was a man who craved power because in his real life, he possessed none. He was a local oddball, a man who inserted himself into the investigation. And in Arlington, the young man became overwhelmed and broke down. He confessed his involvement, but insisted that he had not acted alone. He revealed that his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had recruited him to participate in what was presented as a trip to Arlington to assist with a specific task. According to Willie, they had traveled from Houston to Arlington on June 9th, 2012. He claimed that his uncle possessed a key to the apartment, allowing him to enter without forcing the door. Once inside, they had intentionally scattered items, left a beer bottle wrapped in the blue bandana, and placed the pills and marijuana cigarette to create the illusion of a gang-related burglary. When the elderly couple returned home, a physical struggle ensued. Willie admitted to assisting his uncle in restraining the couple, after which they were secured with duct tape and placed in the bedroom closet before the two men departed back to Houston. When pressed by detectives as to why they would target an elderly couple they did not know, Willie pointed to a spiritual advisor in Houston named Daphne Wright. He explained that his uncle had met with Daphne, who claimed that a family owed her a substantial amount of money and had refused to pay. According to Willie, Daphne had suggested that if the debt could not be resolved, she wanted the individuals involved permanently removed, orchestrating the plan and providing the key to the residence. With this crucial testimony, investigators moved swiftly to locate Bobby Guillory. In December of 2015, detectives located the 52-year-old Bobby at his residence in Katy, Texas, and placed him under arrest. Faced with the reality of the charges and the confession of his nephew, Bobby also chose to cooperate, expressing deep remorse and fear. Bobby confirmed that he had been experiencing severe financial difficulties in 2011 after losing his job. He claimed that Daphne Wright had approached him, offering him $10,000 to carry out the task. He portrayed Daphne as a powerful figure who managed her clients with extreme authority, operating almost as a spiritual creditor. Bobby explained that the financial arrangement between Daphne and the Sewing family had grown extraordinarily complicated over many months. Chow Tran and Hong Lu had continuously sought Daphne's spiritual services on credit, believing that her rituals were essential to saving their business. Over time, this accumulated debt had ballooned to an immense sum estimated to be between $250,000 and $280,000. When Daphne demanded payment, the family was unable to produce the funds. Knowing that the couple held significant life insurance policies, Daphne allegedly realized that the payout from these policies could resolve the outstanding debt. According to Bobby, Daphne had instructed him on how to proceed, even providing him with a key to the apartment, a key that she claimed to have received directly from Chow Tran. Part 5, The Scales of Justice. The investigation now turned its full attention to Daphne Wright. On August 31st, 2016, detectives visited her home in Houston. She lived a seemingly structured life with her husband and 3 daughters. presenting herself as a strong, direct presence within her household and community. When questioned, Daphne acknowledged that she knew Chow Tran as a client, but declined to provide details regarding their financial transactions. She maintained a calm, distant demeanor, offering no assistance to the investigators. Undeterred, detectives secured an arrest warrant and a search warrant for her residence. During the search of her home, investigators discovered detailed financial ledgers. These records revealed that Daphne charged substantial fees, ranging from $10,000 to $40,000 for her spiritual services, which included rituals to alter fortunes and address personal disputes. Her husband, Howard, cooperated with the police, maintaining his complete ignorance of any criminal activity and asserting his belief in his wife's innocence. To build a successful prosecution against the primary organizer of the crime, the state recognized the necessity of securing definitive testimony. In 2015, financial investigators subpoenaed Chow Tran's records, discovering that following the passing of his in-laws, he had purchased a new home, and the sewing business had been permanently closed. Under the guidance of his legal counsel, Chow eventually agreed to speak with prosecutors. He presented a narrative in which his family had felt completely dominated by Daphne's perceived spiritual authority. He claimed that they believed she possessed the power to cast devastating curses as easily as she could lift them, leaving them in a state of constant fear regarding their unresolved debt. Chow made the startling assertion that his mother-in-law, Hong Le, had grown so desperate to protect her family from spiritual harm that she had suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to satisfy Daphne. He claimed that Daphne had embraced the idea, insisting that both elderly parents must pass away to ensure the insurance payout would cover the entirety of the debt. While investigators found the notion of Hong volunteering for such a fate highly implausible, they recognized that Chow's testimony was vital to securing a conviction against Daphne. In exchange for his full cooperation and testimony, prosecutors offered Chow immunity. The trial of Daphne Wright commenced on August 26, 2019. Chow Tran took the stand, describing Daphne as an exceptionally demanding and manipulative individual who would stop at nothing to secure the funds she believed she was owed. The defense vigorously challenged Chow's credibility, arguing that he had fabricated the story of spiritual coercion to obscure his own financial motives. They pointed out the complete lack of written documentation, emails, or receipts verifying the existence of a $280,000 debt. The defense contended that Chow had orchestrated the plan to secure the $850,000 in insurance benefits for his own personal enrichment, highlighting that he had received immunity while remaining deeply complicit. Despite the defense's arguments, the jury deliberated carefully on the evidence presented, including the testimonies of Willie and Bobby Guillory. In September of 2019, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on the charges of capital murder. Daphne Wright was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The resolution of the trial brought a quiet end to a long and painful chapter for the community. For the detectives who had dedicated years of their lives to uncovering the truth, the outcome was bittersweet. While the individuals who carried out the physical act and the person who organized it were held accountable, the immunity granted to Chow Tran remained a point of professional contemplation. Yet, the primary focus remained on honoring the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, two hardworking individuals who had ventured across the world to build a legacy of love and unity for their family. Their journey, marked by hope, perseverance, and an enduring commitment to their heritage, serve as a reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the quiet, persistent pursuit of justice. The summer sun of Texas had a way of baking the pavement until the air itself seemed to shimmer with heat. But on the morning of June 10th, 2012, the air in Arlington carried a different kind of stillness. It was early, just past 7:29 in the morning, when the quiet of a residential neighborhood was broken by the arrival of a police cruiser Officer Weller, a seasoned responder with 14 years of service, guided his patrol car to a halt outside an apartment complex. He had received a dispatch for a welfare check, a routine call that usually ended with a simple explanation, an oversleeping relative, a misplaced telephone, or a brief trip to the market. But as he stepped out into the humid morning air, he saw a family gathered on the sidewalk, their faces etched with a deep, silent worry. Among them was Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant who had made the call. Chow was the primary link between his family and the wider English-speaking community of Arlington. Having worked closely with his father-in-law, Long Nguyen, and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, Chow explained to the officer that they had come to check on the elderly couple, only to find the apartment silent. The family had noticed a window slightly ajar, a detail that filled them with an inexplicable dread. They stood outside, too terrified to cross the threshold themselves. Officer Weller walked up to the apartment door, calling out as he entered. The living room was in complete disarray. Compact discs were scattered across the floor, drawer handles hung open, and furniture had been pushed aside as if in a hurried search for valuables. It bore all the traditional hallmarks of a burglary. He searched the kitchen, then the bathroom. Finding nothing, he walked into the quiet bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared empty, and Weller felt a brief wave of relief. He assumed the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk to escape the heat, leaving their home vulnerable to an opportunistic thief. But as he turned to leave, the beam of his flashlight caught a series of dark hand smudges on the wall next to a small, narrow closet. A sudden hesitation took hold of him. A veteran's instinct whispered that something was deeply wrong behind that closet door. Taking a breath, he pulled it open. Inside the cramped space lay Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They were bound with heavy duct tape, their heads wrapped tightly. The sheer brutality of the scene left the officer in a state of profound shock. He stepped back out into the living room, unable to speak, unable to even use his radio for several long moments. When he finally regained his composure, he requested immediate assistance from a supervisor and the homicide unit. Soon, Detective Stewart and his team from the Arlington Police Department arrived. Stewart, a veteran with 21 years in homicide, found himself shaken by the senseless violence inflicted upon an elderly, defenseless couple. The physical evidence pointed toward a robbery gone wrong, but the extreme nature of the binding suggested something far more personal. On the coffee table, investigators found unusual items designed to look like the remnants of a wild night: a plate of crushed prescription pills and a discarded marijuana cigarette. Tied around a nearby beer bottle was a light blue bandana. To some, this would suggest the involvement of local street gangs, which were known to operate in parts of the region. However, Detective Stewart remained skeptical. The scene felt too perfectly arranged, almost like a stage play designed to lead investigators down a false path. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, seeking to build a legacy for their children and grandchildren. They had established a commercial sewing business in Arlington, a city with a vibrant and industrious Vietnamese community. For a time, their business flourished, even securing contracts with major entertainment brands. But by 2011, their fortunes had shifted. A major contract was lost, and the business began to struggle under a mountain of debt. In their search for a solution, the family turned to traditional beliefs. They sought the assistance of a spiritual advisor who advertised services to lift curses and bring good fortune. Chow Tran and his mother-in-law had traveled to Houston to consult with a woman named Daphne Wright. Daphne promised to restore their luck, but instead of relief, the family found themselves trapped in an escalating financial arrangement. The fees for her rituals accumulated rapidly, eventually growing to a sum between $250,000 and $280,000. As the investigation proceeded, the medical examiner revealed that the cause of death was suffocation due to the extensive duct tape wrapped around the victims' faces. The brutality of the act reinforced the detective's belief that this was not a simple burglary. A breakthrough occurred when the insurance company contacted Detective Stewart regarding a life insurance policy on the couple worth over $1 million. The primary beneficiary was Chow Tran. When questioned, Chow explained that the policy was intended to ensure the continuity of the family business in the event of a tragedy. Chow and his family possessed solid alibis for the night of the murders, having attended a birthday celebration that lasted late into the evening. For over 2 years, the case grew cold. DNA collected from a marijuana cigarette left at the scene did not match any profiles in the national database. Then, in 2015, a man named Willie Guillory was arrested for a felony horse theft in Houston. Because of his new felony conviction, his DNA was entered into the national system. It was an exact match for the sample recovered from the crime scene. At the time of the murders, Willie had been only 16 years old. When confronted by detectives with the DNA evidence, Willie broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. His uncle, Bobby Guillory, had brought him along to Arlington. Bobby had been given a key to the apartment to stage the robbery. More importantly, Willie revealed that the entire plot had been orchestrated by Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor. Daphne had demanded her money, and when the family could not pay, she declared that she wanted them dead, so the insurance policies could be collected. In December of 2015, police arrested Bobby Guillory. Facing capital murder charges, Bobby confessed to his role, confirming that Daphne had promised him $10,000 to carry out the deed. He also dropped a bombshell. Daphne had obtained the apartment key directly from Chow Tran. The revelation of Chow's involvement stunned investigators. It appeared that Chow, desperate to escape the massive debt and under the intense psychological influence of Daphne, had agreed to the plan. He had left the key under a mat for the conspirators to find. To secure a conviction against Daphne Wright, whom prosecutors viewed as the mastermind and puppet master of the entire tragedy, they offered Chow Tran immunity in exchange for his full and honest testimony. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow testified extensively, describing Daphne as a greedy and controlling figure who held immense sway over his family's decisions. The defense argued that Chow was using the spiritual advisor as a scapegoat to pocket the insurance, pay out for himself, pointing out the lack of written documentation regarding the massive debt. The jury ultimately found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in crime, although Chow Tran walked free due to his immunity agreement. The investigators maintained their belief that justice, in its own way, would eventually find its balance for everyone involved. The warmth of the Texas sun in early summer always had a way of reminding Long Gwyn of his youth. In the quiet, green outskirts of his homeland, it was a gentle warmth, the kind that settled deep into bones and promised that, no matter how difficult the journey had been, the earth would always offer a place to rest, to build and to grow. Alongside his beloved wife, Hong Lu, Long had spent his entire life believing in the quiet power of patience, hard work, and the invisible threads of destiny that connected human souls. To understand their journey is to understand the quiet strength of those who carry their entire world in a few suitcases, crossing vast oceans in search of a peaceful harbor. When the couple first arrived in the United States of America in the year 2000, they did not see a foreign land of cold concrete. They saw a grand, open canvas where their children and grandchildren could write stories of joy, achievement, and security. They settled in Arlington, a bustling city nestled in Tarrant County, where the breeze carried the laughter of a diverse and thriving Vietnamese community. For more than a decade, their home was a sanctuary of sweet aromas, traditional melodies, and the steady, rhythmic hum of sewing machines. Long and Hong had established a commercial sewing business, transforming simple fabrics into beautiful garments. It was a family endeavor drawing their children and their son-in-law, Chow Tran, who possessed a fluent English and charismatic presence needed to represent the business to local contractors. For many years, the family thrived, even securing a wonderful and lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, bringing magic to children across the nation. But life, much like the changing seasons, is rarely a straight path of uninterrupted sunshine. By the year 2011, the grand contract had concluded, and the gentle hum of the sewing machines began to slow. In moments of quiet anxiety, the human heart often looks backward, seeking comfort in the ancient traditions and spiritual beliefs of the ancestors. Long and Hong, like many before them, believed that the flow of prosperity was governed by unseen spiritual forces, and that sometimes a helping hand was needed to lift the heavy clouds of misfortune. It was this search for hope that led the family to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor. Through a local newspaper, they discovered a woman named Daphne Wright, who operated from Houston, some 250 miles away. She promised to lift curses, restore harmony, and bring back the golden days of abundance. What began as a sincere quest for peace, however, gradually became a complicated web of reliance, debt, and deep spiritual worry. On a quiet Sunday morning on June 10, 2012, the peaceful silence of the Arlington neighborhood was broken by a call to emergency services. Chow Tran requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, noting that they had not answered their door and that a window to their apartment was unusually open when the first responding officers arrived. They were met by a worried family waiting anxiously outside. Officer Weller, a dedicated public servant with 14 years of experience, approached the residents with a calm and reassuring demeanor. Upon entering, the apartment showed signs of a sudden and chaotic intrusion. Items were scattered, and the usual pristine order of the elderly couple's home was replaced by disarray. Moving cautiously through the rooms, the officer eventually discovered the tragic truth within a small bedroom closet. The beloved elders Long and Hong had been targeted in a terrible act of greed. The initial examination suggested a staged scene designed to mimic the chaotic patterns of local street gangs. A light blue bandana wrapped around a bottle and scattered personal items were left behind as a false trail. Yet, the seasoned homicide investigators, including Detective Stewart with 21 years of service, quickly realized that this was not a random burglary. It was far too deliberate, far too personal. The investigation that followed became a testament to the tireless dedication of the local police force, who refused to let the memory of Long and Hong fade into the cold archives of unsolved cases. For more than 2 years, the team pursued every potential lead, interviewing dozens of neighbors, family members, and associates, leaving no stone unturned. The breakthrough came in the year 2015 through a remarkable twist of fate. A young man named Willie Guillory, who had been a minor at the time of the offense, was arrested in Houston on an unrelated charge. His DNA profile, newly entered into the national database, provided a perfect match to a small piece of evidence recovered from the Arlington apartment. When questioned by investigators, Willie broke down and revealed the truth. He had been led into the scheme by his uncle, Bobby Guillory, under the direction of the spiritual advisor, Daphne Wright. The plot had been born not out of gang rivalry, but out of a terrible, misplaced sense of financial desperation and greed surrounding the family's outstanding debts and life insurance policies. Bobby Guillory was soon apprehended, and he too confessed, confirming that Daphne Wright was the central coordinator who had organized the plan, believing she could claim the family's assets. The key to the apartment had been left under a mat, a tragic detail that pointed to an insider's compliance. In August of the year 2019, the wheels of justice turned fully. Daphne Wright was brought to trial, where the details of her spiritual business and the heavy financial burdens she placed on her clients were laid bare before a jury. Despite the complex nature of the testimonies, the truth prevailed. Daphne was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she could never again exploit the faith and hope of vulnerable families. Though the legal journey left some questions lingering regarding the full extent of everyone's involvement, the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu remains a shining beacon of love, resilience, and family devotion. They are remembered not by the shadows of their final moments, but by the decades of warmth, laughter, and beautiful garments they created, wrapping their community in the enduring embrace of their heritage. The morning sun always had a way of softening the harsh edges of Arlington, Texas, casting a golden, warm glow over the sprawling suburban landscapes. For many years, this city had been a sanctuary for families seeking new beginnings, a place where different cultures interlace like threads in a grand, colorful tapestry. Among those who had crossed oceans to weave their own thread into this community were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They were a couple who carried the quiet dignity of their homeland, Vietnam, in every step they took, possessing a warmth that endeared them to everyone they met. They had lived lives of honest labor, building a commercial sewing business from the ground up with the hope of leaving a lasting legacy. For their 3 children and grandchildren, their lives were defined by deep family bonds, a shared history of resilience, and an unwavering belief in the goodness of people. Yet, on the morning of June the 10th, 2012, that peaceful dream was shattered in a way that left even the most seasoned investigators in a state of profound disbelief. It began at 7:29 in the morning with a phone call to emergency dispatchers. The voice on the other end belonged to 38-year-old Chow Tran, a Vietnamese immigrant and the son-in-law of the elderly couple. His voice carried a tremor of deep worry as he requested a welfare check on his in-laws, explaining that they were not answering their door and that things at their apartment did not look right. Chow explained that his father-in-law, Long, was in his 70s, and that his family had gathered outside the residence. Too terrified by the unusually open window and the eerie silence to venture inside themselves, when the responding officers arrived at the quiet apartment complex, they immediately sensed that this was no ordinary welfare check. It was rare to receive such requests so early in the morning, and the sight of an entire family standing outside in the morning chill, paralyzed by anxiety, signaled that something was terribly wrong. Upon entering the apartment, the signs of what appeared to be a burglary in progress were everywhere. The rooms were in disarray, with drawers pulled out and items scattered across the floor. Officer Weller, a dedicated officer with 14 years of experience, moved through the quiet home, calling out into the silence. There was no response. The living room, kitchen, and bathroom were completely empty. At first glance, the bedroom also appeared vacant. Relieved, the officer turned to leave, thinking perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk. But as he turned back toward the door, his flashlight beam caught a series of small, dark-hand smudges on the wall next to a narrow closet. A sudden, chilling intuition urged him to hesitate. Following his duty, he slowly pulled open the closet door. Inside, the tragic reality of what had occurred was laid bare. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu were gone, their lives taken in an unspeakably violent and cruel manner. They had been bound tightly with duct tape, and their heads and mouths were covered in layers of the thick adhesive. The scene was incredibly chaotic and bloody, indicating a fierce struggle. For the responding officer, the sight was a devastating shock that momentarily stole his ability to speak or even use his radio to call for backup. When the homicide detectives arrived, led by veterans who had spent over 21 years investigating the city's darkest corners, they too were deeply shaken. It was clear that the couple had been subjected to severe physical force before their passing. Initial clues scattered around the apartment seemed to point in many directions. There was a plate with crushed prescription pills on a table, a discarded marijuana cigarette, and a light blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle. To the investigators, these items felt almost too deliberate, like a carefully staged theatrical scene. The light blue bandana was a color often associated with active local gangs known for extorting local businesses, and at first, a robbery or gang extortion gone wrong seemed like the most logical theory. Yet, experienced detectives knew that sometimes things that appear too perfect are designed to mislead. Real gang members rarely left such neat, obvious calling cards after committing such extreme crime. They suspected the scene had been staged to throw them off the track. As the community mourned the loss of the sweet, generous couple who had never bothered a soul, the police began the painstaking process of interviewing family members and collecting forensic evidence. Because Chow Tran spoke the most fluent English, he became the primary spokesperson for the grieving family. He explained to detectives that the family had gathered the previous evening to celebrate his father-in-law's birthday. The elderly couple had enjoyed themselves, staying until 10:30 before receiving a ride home. That was the last time anyone admitted to seeing them alive. Chow painted a picture of a sewing business that, despite their best efforts, had fallen on hard times. They had once secured a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a major commercial giant, even producing items for Disney. But by 2011, that contract was lost, and the business began a steep downward spiral. Desperate to save their livelihood and protect their family from financial ruin, the couple turned to the deeply rooted spiritual traditions of their youth. In many traditional cultures, when a family faces sudden, overwhelming misfortune such as bankruptcy or severe legal trouble, they seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to perform cleansing rituals and ward off perceived curses. Searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow and his mother-in-law, Hong, discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a unique ability to lift powerful curses and bring immense good fortune to those in need. Hoping to turn their luck around, Chow and Hong traveled to Houston to consult with Daphne. She performed elaborate rituals, promising that their business would soon flourish once more. But rather than bringing prosperity, this relationship marked the beginning of a much darker chapter. Over the course of a year, as the business continued to struggle, the family became deeply indebted to Daphne. She ran her spiritual services on credit, and the debt quickly ballooned to an astronomical sum of between $250,000 and $280,000. As the investigation into the murders deepened, detectives uncovered a major financial detail. The elderly couple had life insurance policies totaling at least $1 million, with Chow Tran named as a beneficiary. When questioned about the policy, Chow maintained that it was a standard business precaution meant to ensure the family could sustain the sewing business if one of them were to pass away. He and his family provided what appeared to be airtight alibis for the night of the crime, explaining they had been playing cards together until late in the evening. For over 2 years, the case remained cold. The forensic samples collected from the crime scene, including the DNA from the discarded marijuana cigarette, did not match anyone in the national databases. It was a frustrating period of silence for the investigators, who refused to let the memory of Long and Hong fade. The breakthrough finally came in 2015, triggered by an entirely unrelated and almost bizarre event. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for a felony involving the theft of a horse near Houston because he had been a 16-year-old minor at the time of the murders in 2012. His DNA had never been entered into the national database. But as an adult felon in 2015, his profile was finally registered, triggering an immediate and perfect match with the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette at the Arlington crime scene. When detectives brought Willie in for questioning, the young man quickly broke down. He confessed that he had been present, but insisted he was merely a follower. He pointed the finger at his uncle, 49-year-old Bobby Guillory, who had enlisted his help for a job in Arlington. According to Willie, they had been given a key to the apartment to stage a burglary. And the entire crime scene, including the bandana, the pills, and the marijuana, had been carefully set up to make it look like the work of local gang members. Most shocking of all was Willie's revelation that the entire crime was a murder-for-hire plot, orchestrated by Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor. Willie recalled hearing Daphne tell his uncle that the family owed her a vast sum of money, and that if they did not pay up, she wanted them dead. Armed with this information, the police arrested Bobby Guillory in December of 2015. Bobby, who had no prior criminal record, also confessed, expressing deep remorse and fear. He admitted that Daphne had targeted his financial desperation, offering him $10,000 to carry out the deed. He revealed that Daphne had learned of the substantial life insurance policies and saw them as the only way to collect the massive debt she felt she was owed. Bobby then dropped a final, stunning bombshell. He claimed that the key to the apartment had come directly from Chow Tran. Detectives were stunned by this revelation of familial betrayal. They focused their efforts on Daphne Wright, arresting her at her Houston home in late 2016. A search of her residence revealed detailed business ledgers showing she charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services and curse removals. Despite her cold and defiant demeanor, the evidence against her was mounting. To secure a conviction against the mastermind, prosecutors made a difficult decision. They offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full, truthful testimony. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as an incredibly greedy and manipulative woman who exercised a powerful, almost hypnotic control over his mind and body. He claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had been so terrified of Daphne's spiritual wrath that she had actually suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay the debt. While investigators found this claim highly implausible, Chow's testimony was crucial. He admitted to leaving the apartment key under a doormat for the perpetrators under Daphne's instructions. In September of 2019, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder, sentencing her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in the tragedy, though the lack of charges against Chow Tran left a lingering sense of incompletion for the detectives who had dedicated years to the case. They found solace in knowing that the truth had finally been brought into the light. The memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, two gentle souls who had crossed the world in search of a peaceful life, was honored by the tireless pursuit of justice, leaving a powerful lesson about the dangers of greed and the enduring strength of truth. Chapter 1: The Horizon of a New Beginning. The sun rose over Arlington, Texas, casting a warm, golden hue across the quiet suburban neighborhoods. To the passing traveler, this was a city of progress, a place where concrete highways intersected with green parks, and where the gentle hum of morning traffic whispered of daily routines and honest labor. But to the families who had traveled across oceans to settle here, it was something far greater. It was a physical manifestation of a promise, the sanctuary where dreams, once whispered in the quiet nights of distant lands, could finally take root and flourish. Among those who found their peace in this bustling community were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They had arrived in the United States in the year 2000, carrying with them very little in the way of material wealth, but possessing an abundance of hope, a profound dedication to hard work, and a deep reverence for their heritage. They were a gentle couple, known to their neighbors for their quiet kindness, their ready smiles, and the meticulous care they took of their modest home. In their native Vietnam, they had learned the value of resilience. Having lived through decades of transition, they understood that true security was not built overnight, but was woven slowly, thread by thread, much like the fabrics they handled daily in their commercial sewing business. When they first arrived in Texas, they brought their 3 children, and immediately sought out ways to contribute to the local community. Arlington possessed a vibrant, growing Vietnamese American population, a community that had established its roots in several waves of immigration, particularly after the historic events of 1975. Long and Hong saw in this community a beautiful tapestry of old and new. Here, one could find traditional markets selling fragrant herbs and fresh ingredients, alongside modern businesses operated by energetic young entrepreneurs. The older generation worked tirelessly to preserve their language, their values, and their spiritual traditions, while ensuring that their children and grandchildren received the very best education the Western world had to offer. With the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, who possessed a strong command of the English language and an outgoing personality, Long and Hong established their sewing enterprise. Chow became the public face of the business, interacted with contractors, negotiating terms, and navigating the complexities of American commerce. For nearly a decade, their efforts were met with remarkable success. They secured lucrative contracts to manufacture garments for major commercial entities, including legendary organizations like Disney. It seemed, for a beautiful stretch of time, that the American dream was not just a distant ideal, but a living reality that they held in their very hands. Chapter 2, The Gathering Shadows. But life, as any seasoned traveler knows, is a series of seasons. By the year 2011, the bright summer of their success began to give way to a challenging autumn. The large contracts that had sustained the sewing business began to dwindle, and the family found themselves facing unexpected financial pressures. In times of difficulty, human beings naturally seek comfort in the familiar, reaching back to the traditions that have sustained their ancestors for generations. In the cultural heritage that Long and Hong cherished, there existed a deep respect for spiritual balance. For thousands of years, people have believed in the existence of unseen forces that govern prosperity, luck, and family harmony. When a business faltered or when sickness touched a household, it was not uncommon to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor, someone who could look beyond the physical world, diagnose the source of misfortune, and perform rituals to restore peace and abundance. Chow Tran, sharing his family's concern for the failing business, began to search for a solution. It was during this period of vulnerability that they came across an advertisement in a local Vietnamese language newspaper. The advertisement spoke of a spiritual advisor located in Houston, some 250 miles away, who possessed the ability to lift curses, invite good fortune, and restore harmony to troubled lives. Her name was Daphne Wright. Encouraged by his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, who held a deep and innocent faith in these traditional practices, Chow made contact with Daphne. The journey to Houston was undertaken with hearts full of hope. They met at Daphne's residence, where she presented herself as a powerful mediator of the spiritual realm. She agreed to perform the necessary rituals to turn their business affairs around. To a family in distress, the promise of a spiritual shield was incredibly comforting. They returned to Arlington with renewed optimism, believing that the dark clouds would soon dissipate. However, as the months passed, the business did not recover. Instead of questioning the efficacy of the rituals, the family's anxiety only deepened. They became caught in a cycle of dependency, believing that perhaps the negative forces affecting them were stronger than initially realized, requiring more elaborate and significantly more expensive spiritual interventions. Daphne Wright, recognizing the depth of their desperation, began to extend services on credit. Over time, the financial obligations ballooned, reaching an astonishing sum between $250,000 and $280,000. This was a debt the family could not possibly hope to pay. Yet they remained terrified of the spiritual consequences of failing to honor their commitments to a woman they believed held the power to bless or curse their lives. Chapter 3, An Autumn Morning in Arlington. The transition from spring to summer in Texas is often marked by sudden intense heat. But the morning of June 10th, 2012, began with a deceptively peaceful stillness. At 7:29 in the morning, the Emergency Dispatch Center in Arlington received a call. The caller was Chow Tran, his voice trembling with a mixture of concern and anxiety. He requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, who resided in a modest apartment nearby. Chow explained to the operator that his son and wife had gone to the apartment to check on the couple, as they had not been able to reach them. They had noticed that a window to the residence was slightly open, and things did not appear correct from the outside. Too anxious to enter themselves, they waited for the authorities to arrive. Officer Weller, a dedicated member of the Arlington Police Department with 14 years of service, was dispatched to the scene. When he arrived, he found the family members gathered outside. It was an unusual sight for so early in the morning, and the palpable tension in the air immediately signaled that this was no ordinary welfare check. Upon entering the apartment, Officer Weller observed signs of what appeared to be a burglary. The living space was in disarray, with items scattered as if someone had searched the home in a hurry. He called out, his voice echoing through the quiet rooms, but there was no response. The kitchen, the bathroom, and the living room were empty. He approached the bedroom, his focus entirely on finding the elderly couple and ensuring their safety. Initially, the room appeared unoccupied. He prepared to turn and leave, hoping that perhaps they had simply gone for an early morning walk, when his flashlight illuminated hand smudges on the wall adjacent to a small closet. A sense of professional instinct, combined with sudden, quiet hesitation, washed over him. He approached the closet door and opened it. Inside, he made a discovery that would haunt his memory for years to come. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu were inside, bound securely with duct tape. There was no life left in them. Chapter 4, The Pursuit of Truth. The arrival of the Arlington homicide investigators marked the beginning of a meticulous search for answers. Detective Stewart, a veteran with 21 years of experience in the division, assumed leadership of the investigation. The scene was one of intense disarray, suggesting a struggle had occurred near the entrance before moving further into the apartment. Among the scattered household items, investigators discovered several peculiar clues. On the coffee table lay a plate with crushed prescription pills, and nearby, a discarded marijuana cigarette. Most striking, however, was a light blue bandana wrapped carefully around a beer bottle. To an observer, these items strongly suggested the involvement of local street gangs, who were known to operate in the wider region and occasionally target local businesses. However, Detective Stewart and his team remained analytical. While the staging of the scene pointed toward gang activity, the sheer severity of the violence directed at a peaceful, elderly couple seemed disproportionate for a simple robbery. They began to consider the possibility that the scene had been intentionally staged to mislead the investigation. The subsequent autopsies revealed the tragic reality of the couple's passing. While they had sustained blunt force injuries, the actual cause of death was suffocation, resulting from the extensive application of duct tape. This revelation deepened the investigators' determination to bring those responsible to justice. This was not a random act of impulse. It was a deliberate, targeted act. Chapter 5, Unseen Connections. In the days following the discovery, investigators worked tirelessly to construct a profile of the victims' lives. Searching for any possible motive, they interviewed neighbors, business associates, and family members, searching for any thread that might lead to a suspect. Chow Tran, as the primary English speaker for the family, cooperated fully with the initial inquiries. He explained that the family had gathered the previous evening to celebrate Long's birthday. The elderly couple had enjoyed themselves thoroughly, leaving the gathering around 10:30 in the evening with a ride from another family member. This was the last time they were seen alive. Chow also discussed the financial challenges of the sewing business, confirming that it had struggled significantly, but he expressed absolute bewilderment as to who would wish harm upon his gentle in-laws. He painted a picture of a sweet, generous couple who had no enemies and lived a quiet life dedicated to their family. A routine inquiry by Detective Stewart with insurance providers soon introduced a complex new element to the case. He learned that a substantial life insurance policy, valued at approximately $1 million, existed on the couple. The designated beneficiary of this policy was Chow Tran himself. When questioned about the policy, Chow explained that it had been established as a protective measure to ensure the continuity of the family business in the event of an unexpected tragedy. Given the airtight alibi provided by Chow and his family for the night of the occurrence, and the lack of any matching physical evidence at the scene, investigators could not establish a direct link. The deoxyribonucleic acid profiles obtained from the cigarette at the scene did not match Chow, any family members, or any individuals registered in the national database. For over 2 years, the investigation continued without a major breakthrough. The files remained on the detectives' desks, a constant reminder of an unsolved tragedy, waiting for the one piece of evidence that would unlock the truth. Chapter 6. The Unlikely Catalyst. Justice often moves along unexpected pathways. In October 2015, over 3 years after the passing of Long and Hong, a seemingly unrelated event in Houston provided the critical breakthrough. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for the theft of a horse, a felony offense in the state of Texas. Because of this felony charge, his physical profile was entered into the national database. Shortly thereafter, the automated system identified a perfect match between Willie's profile and the evidence recovered from the cigarette at the Arlington apartment in 2012. At the time of the incident, Willie had been only 16 years old, which explained why his profile had not previously appeared in adult databases. Armed with this definitive scientific link, investigators brought Willie in for questioning. Under careful interrogation, the young man's resolve collapsed. He broke down, weeping, and admitted his presence at the scene, but insisted he had not acted alone. He revealed that his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had recruited him for a trip to Arlington in June of 2012. Willie explained that his uncle possessed a key to the apartment and had instructed him to help stage the scene to look like a gang-related burglary, utilizing the bandana, the pills, and the bottle. When asked why they had targeted the specific couple, Willie delivered a statement that shifted the entire direction of the case. He asserted that the entire event was a contract arrangement orchestrated by a woman named Daphne. Right. Chapter 7. The Mastermind Revealed. The revelation of Daphne Wright's involvement connected the separate pieces of the puzzle. Investigators now understood that this was not a random tragedy, but a calculated plan born of greed and manipulation. Detectives traveled to Houston to locate Bobby Guillory. Upon his arrest, Bobby also confessed to his role, confirming that Daphne had promised him $10,000 to carry out the act. He explained that he had been in a desperate financial situation at the time, having lost his employment, and had allowed himself to be swayed by Daphne's promises. Bobby described Daphne as an assertive, controlling figure who managed her spiritual consulting business with absolute authority. He revealed that the financial debt owed by the Arlington family had reached a point where Daphne demanded resolution, knowing of the substantial life insurance policies. She had devised a plan to eliminate the couple so that the insurance funds could be collected and used to satisfy the outstanding debt. Most shockingly, Bobby claimed that the key to the apartment had been provided directly by Chow Tran. With this evidence, investigators arrested Daphne right at her home in Houston. A search of her residence revealed detailed business ledgers, documenting transactions where she charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for spiritual services. Chapter 8. The Scales of Justice. The legal proceedings that followed brought the tragic narrative to its final resolution. To secure the conviction of the primary organizer, prosecutors made the difficult decision to offer immunity to Chow Tran in exchange for his complete and truthful testimony against Daphne Wright Bobby Guillory and Willie Guillory. In the courtroom, Chow presented a detailed account of the events. He described how the family had become entirely dependent on Daphne, believing in her spiritual authority and fearing the consequences of her anger. He testified that the pressure of the debt had created a state of complete desperation, leading to the tragic decision to sacrifice his in-laws to satisfy the financial demands. The defense argued vigorously that Chow was a willing participant who had directed the events for his own financial gain, highlighting the lack of written documentation regarding the massive spiritual debt. However, the testimony provided a clear and compelling narrative of the manipulation and greed that had driven the conspiracy. In September of 2019, the jury returned a verdict of guilty against Daphne Wright for capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby Guillory and Willie Guillory also faced the legal consequences of their actions, ensuring that those who had physically carried out the act were removed from society. While the investigators expressed professional disappointment that Chow Tran did not face criminal charges due to the immunity agreement, they took solace in the knowledge that the primary force behind the tragedy had been held accountable. The community of Arlington and the family members who remained could finally find a sense of peace, knowing that the truth had been brought completely into the light of day. The morning sun always had a way of softening the harsh edges of Arlington, Texas, casting a golden, warm glow over the sprawling suburban landscapes. For many years, this city had been a sanctuary for families seeking new beginnings, a place where different cultures interlace like threads in a grand, colorful tapestry. Among those who had crossed oceans to weave their own thread into this community were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They were a couple who carried the quiet dignity of their homeland, Vietnam, in every step they took, possessing a warmth that endeared them to everyone they met. They had lived lives of honest labor, building a commercial sewing business in the ground up with the hope of leaving a lasting legacy for their 3 children and grandchildren. Their lives were defined by deep family bonds, a shared history of resilience, and an unwavering belief in the goodness of people. Yet, on the morning of June the 10th, 2012, that peaceful dream was shattered in a way that left even the most seasoned investigators in a state of profound disbelief. It began at 7:29 in the morning with a phone call to emergency dispatchers. The voice on the other end belonged to 38-year-old Chow Tran, a Vietnamese immigrant and the son-in-law of the elderly couple. His voice carried a tremor of deep worry as he requested a welfare check on his in-laws, explaining that they were not answering their door and that things at their apartment did not look right. Chow explained that his father-in-law, Long, was in his 70s and that his family had gathered outside the residence. Too terrified by the unusually open window and the eerie silence to venture inside themselves, when the responding officers arrived at the quiet apartment complex, they immediately sensed that this was no ordinary welfare check. It was rare to receive such requests so early in the morning, and the sight of an entire family standing outside in the morning chill, paralyzed by anxiety, signaled that something was terribly wrong. Upon entering the apartment, the signs of what appeared to be a burglary in progress were everywhere. The rooms were in disarray, with drawers pulled out and items scattered across the floor. Officer Weller, a dedicated officer with 14 years of experience, moved through the quiet home, calling out into the silence. There was no response. The living room, kitchen, and bathroom were completely empty. At first glance, the bedroom also appeared vacant. Relieved, the officer turned to leave, thinking perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk. But as he turned back toward the door, his flashlight beam caught a series of small, dark hand smudges on the wall next to a narrow closet. A sudden, chilling intuition urged him to hesitate. Following his duty, he slowly pulled open the closet door. Inside, the tragic reality of what had occurred was laid bare. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu were gone, their lives taken in an unspeakably violent and cruel manner. They had been bound tightly with duct tape, and their heads and mouths were covered in layers of the thick adhesive. The scene was incredibly chaotic and bloody, indicating a fierce struggle. For the responding officer, the sight was a devastating shock that momentarily stole his ability to speak or even use his radio to call for backup. When the homicide detectives arrived, led by veterans who had spent over 21 years investigating the city's darkest corners, they too were deeply shaken. It was clear that the couple had been subjected to severe physical force before their passing. Initial clues scattered around the apartment seemed to point in many directions. There was a plate with crushed prescription pills on a table, a discarded marijuana cigarette, and a light blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle. To the investigators, these items felt almost too deliberate, like a carefully staged theatrical scene. The light blue bandana was a color often associated with active local gangs known for extorting local businesses, and at first, a robbery or gang extortion gone wrong seemed like the most logical theory. Yet, experienced detectives knew that sometimes things that appear too perfect are designed to mislead. Real gang members rarely left